Hi, everyone. My name's Shahid. I'm a product manager on Chrome OS. Thank you very much for coming to the session today. I've had the chance to speak to a few of you here. Really delighted that you're here with us. So today we're going to talk a little bit about optimizing Android apps for Chromebooks and large screen devices. So just before I start that, I'd love to get a show of hands. Who here has used Chrome OS before? That's awesome. Who here has a Chrome OS device with them right now? And if you do have it, could you hold it up? All right, great. All right, thank you. So the Chrome OS team are on a live stream in the Googleplex, and they're watching all this. So we're always really excited to see folk using Chrome OS, so thank you for doing that. So for those of you who have been exposed to Chrome OS before, have come across it before, and have spoken to us before, you're probably very familiar with these three ideas. We've been very consistent about the ideas behind Chrome OS since we started. We want Chrome OS to be fast. Fast to start up, fast to use. We want it to be easy. We want it to be easy to use. It's a tool. The way that we think about it is we want Chrome OS to get out of the way so you can get to where you want to go. We don't want to show pop-ups announcing a driver update, selling you productivity software. You should just get to where you want to go. And security. That's been top of mind for us since Chrome OS began. So that's led to some big moments for us over the last few years. So at I/O last year, we announced that Chromebook shipments overtook Macs in the United States. Now, that's in part due to our strength in EDU, where Chromebooks outsell every other device combined. But that's also been the case in retail. So we've seen nearly 20% growth year on year, in holiday weeks up to 50% growth. So Chrome OS is really strong and continues to grow. But as we talk today about optimization, it's not just helpful for Chrome OS. So phones like the Samsung Galaxy S8 with its desktop projection mode use a windowing system. And a lot of the optimizations we talk about today will be helpful for that too. There's also devices that are in a laptop format that run Android, like the Lenovo YogaBook and the A12. They use keyboard, they use touchpad input. So thinking about how to optimize for Chrome OS will help for these form factors too. So let's talk a little bit about desktop apps and how they're different from the mobile form factor. So mobile apps, for myself, I tend to use them in short bursts, maybe a few minutes, maybe 20 minutes at a time. And if I think about buying a mobile app, it's something that could cost a few dollars. Desktop apps, I and maybe many of you use those for many hours at a time during the day. And buying one of those, buying that for a few $100s is not unreasonable. So these simple changes in the form factor, a bigger screen, faster input with mouse and keyboard, drive a really different kind of usage. And the first thing that we might think about as Android developers is how do we extend our current app onto the desktop platform? And then ongoing, we may think about other opportunities to do something very different on the desktop platform. So that different type of usage has been reflected in our own analytics. So we've seen that users who are using immersive apps like messaging, gaming, productivity, spend more time on that app in a Chromebook than they do on mobile devices. And so an example is AutoCAD. So I met a couple of developers back there who are with us today. Thanks for coming. They've been working with us to try and optimize. And some of the usage that we've seen on Chrome OS devices has been much stronger. So let's talk a little bit about some of the high-level specifics about what you can do to optimize for Chrome OS and also these large screen and other types of devices. First, Chromebooks work like any other Android device. So if you have an app in the Google Play Store, it probably already works on Chrome OS. Many developers test only for mobile, which is completely understandable. So just seeing the app for the first time running on Chrome OS will probably illustrate the need to do some optimization work. Those optimizations usually come down to 4 differences between mobile and desktop. The first is wider screens. It's probably the most common issue. So of course, your mobile device has a screen that's this wide. Your laptop device will have a screen that's this wide. And some apps don't use screen real estate, maybe like they should. And that's not just third-party apps. This is work that we have to do too. So this is an example of maps running in the Explore Around You view on Chrome OS. And you can see there's a narrow strip of content in the middle, and the content's not reflowing properly to take up gaps on the side of the screen. This is another example. This is a conversation from Google Hangouts. And as you can see, each message from each of the participants is hard aligned to the left and right. So it's hard to read downwards. The eye has to jump from side to side to get the gist of the conversation. The second item, phones are default portrait, laptops are default landscape. So this is an example. This is Stormfall, Rise of Valor, an Android game. Chrome OS respects that setting that locks an app to portrait. So on a landscape screen, the view is still in portrait. So that leaves a lot of the screen blank. And as you can see here, those rich graphics are locked in the strip in the center of the screen. The third item is windowing. So many apps assume that the display size is equal to the window size. And that's not always the case, even on Android. Part of the value of desktop, though, is multitasking, being able to see lots of different windows and apps running at the same time. So it's often not the case that the window size is equal to the display size. Apps need to understand that. So for example, they can correctly understand the input of a stylus, for example, and draw the ink in the correct position, and there's no offset errors. And finally, keyboard, pointer, and stylus input. So there's lots of common states here that are uncommon on mobile. So for example, hover states that will show things like tooltips. I hover over an icon, tooltip appears. It's just really unusual to be able to do that on mobile. And the reverse is also true. So states and actions that are really common on mobile could be less common on desktop. So an example, swipe to dismiss, for example, of an email or an item in a list. That's super easy to do and very intuitive on mobile, where you have touch. That's right there. Whereas on desktop, doing that with a mouse it's a little more unusual. Those kinds of updates that we're talking about can be very simple. So let me give you an example. So we've been working closely with the team at Slack. And so this is an example of Slack app running on Chrome OS. So those of you who use Slack are probably familiar that in the bottom right here, there's a big box for entering your next message and sending it out to the team. So if you type that in and press Enter, originally, that just sent a carriage return because the mobile device wasn't used to seeing keyboard input. So it wasn't tested. Very understandable. But the Slack team helped us to do a little work optimizing this. And now hitting Enter will send a message, so it works like you'd expect. So this is a quick summary of the top-level items that will help those apps work like you'd expect on desktop and get you happier users. So with that, I'd like to introduce Stefan, our tech lead for window management on Chrome OS.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I'm here to talk about how to improve your application for the use in the desktop world, means with Chromebooks or large screen devices. The most important thing you can do to your application in order to get the best out of desktop world is go to at least API level 24. Because with API level 24, we can remove all the restrictions of window sizes and whatnot, which we have actually put in place for older applications. The next big thing you should really do is you should use both orientations. So, as we have seen earlier, so the thing is most applications are coming nowadays in phone size, means like it's portrait. And the thing is portrait alone is good for a phone, but it's not good for a desktop. So therefore, by having also landscape at the same time, you are improving the usage of your application on a desktop device. The next thing, well, if you ever have to only really rely on one orientation, which is possible, you can actually specify that, and please specify that in the manifest so that we know that this is the case. The next thing you should do is, well, there are different sizes of screens. You might actually have something which is 10-inch, but you might actually have something with a 40-inch, or maybe something like that. I don't know who has that in the living room, but it would be nice, right? So, and with that, you definitely want to show, of course, more content. And therefore, by using the standard mechanisms which are already in Android, multiple layouts and whatnot, you can do all these kind of things. Yeah, and then there is mouse and keyboard. Well, mouse and keyboard is something which is totally useful on a notebook, but on a phone you have possibly never really used it, with a good reason. So, the next thing is you should actually add stuff for accessibility, like, for example, adding content descriptions so that the user can actually hear what you are doing there. So, and then there are, of course, all the usual suspects, like, for example, all these old APIs, which are there already since ever, like drag and drop support, it's like the hover API, which we have heard earlier, and all these kind of things. By doing so, you are doing a perfect job of getting into a good desktop experience. And you know, most of these APIs are already there. There's nothing really new. And by doing that, you are also getting a much better citizen on the phone world. So with that, coming to the window management on Chrome OS. So we have learned some lessons from our previous year. So in our previous year, we had, well, our first incarnation, which was built on M. And yeah, it has a lot of problems. We said it was beta, and beta it was. Well, there are millions of applications. There are many different APIs. Well, back then it were 24. Now it's 26. And if you're going online, you are trying to search, for example, on how to figure out what the size of the screen is. Well, you will get 30 different versions of how you can do that, or even more. And the thing is, everything will be upvoted. Well, that tells you if something will go wrong, can go wrong, it will definitely go wrong. There's no question there. So, and then there were the problems of orientations. Like, for example, you're starting an application, it starts out in landscape, then it changes to portrait, and it jumps around. And this is, of course, totally annoying for the user. And we had some good ideas in mind of actually adding there a special button which allowed you to change the orientation at any point in time, which was well thought. But the problem is that since an application could at any point in time say, hey, I really want to be portrait, suddenly the button was disappearing and it was gone. So, which was, of course, also very confusing to the user. So then we had application restarts, so unexpected ones. So like, for example, the window changes its size, and it lost its state, and the user was then had to actually restart the game from the beginning, which was, of course, totally annoying. All these kind of things were pretty bad. So, and at the end, we had then, of course, the problem that the windows, they didn't really expect to be in a windowed world to begin with, which was another problem. Which brings me to our next thing. So these are, in our new window manager, the special window modes we are supporting. So essentially, we have the pre-density aware applications. These are always being shown full screen. So I really hope that you are not programming any of these kind of applications anymore, unless you want to have the biggest button of the world. Might be a good thing, but you possibly don't want that. So the next thing is pre-N. Pre-N, that is something in between. That means it includes Marshmallow. Well, we figured out that most of the applications out there, they are working fine. So they're working reasonably well. But the thing is, there are a lot of applications which don't. So and with that, we were getting a lot of beta feedback and so on. So, and in order to resolve this issue, we have put them all into Windows. So they are static now. They have always the same size. It's like it's coming up in phone size. So, and it can then be either landscape or portrait. The user has an option where he can actually then say, hey, I want to have that thing as big as possible, which makes it then a portrait-sized window on a landscape screen, which is the biggest thing what you can do. And if it rotates, it's not filling the screen entirely. But that is pre-N. If you are moving to N, what I told you already, it's a good idea to do. You have then the full freedom of getting resizable. You can actually be full screen, you can be windowed, and so on and so on. And if you don't want to be resizable in N, you can say, I want to be unresizable, which essentially puts you in the full desktop. And then the last thing is, you can actually have an application which essentially dictates us, hey, I want to be this size and at this location, and we respect that. So the big change to previous versions was that we have a new rule, and that is that the root activity rules, which essentially means that the root activity is you have multiple activities which are making up the task stack, and the top activity is the one which you see, and the bottommost one, that is the root activity. So if the root activity is, for example, let's say landscape, and it's resizable, that means that every activity which goes on top is also landscape and resizable. That sounds a little bit weird, right? Because the thing is that would mean that if you have an application which was meant to be portrait and maybe unresizable, it could suddenly become resizable and landscape, which is a contradiction in itself, right? Well, the thing is, first, if you're looking on a phone and you have the side-by-side mode, the same thing is being done there. And the second thing is that most of the applications which are really locked into one mode are games. So in the games, they usually don't use layouts and whatnot, and therefore they really need this treatment. But once you're using a layout and the standard framework, which gives you all this kind of thing, it can relay out your stuff so that it's still usable that way. And with this, you have no window jumping, everything looks much cleaner to the user, and it's really a good experience. And then there is, well, you have possibly seen already Chromebooks, right? Chromebooks looks like this. But you know, if you have not seen it, you can also convert it into a tablet form factor. So what happens when you're going into the tablet form factor? In that case, we are actually forcing the size if it's an M application. So the size will actually then be restricted to whatever it was before. But the orientation can go exactly as you are doing it on a phone, which means like the root activity doesn't have any kind of impact on that anymore. So orientation, I mentioned that earlier already. We have, well, two orientations, which is portrait and landscape. Well, one is good for phones, one is good for, well, tablets and notebooks. And then there's unspecified. Unspecified means you can do both. We definitely encourage you to do that, because that's best. So, and if you really have to use one of these things, please specify that in your manifest file. Please put in that you have to be landscape. Don't make us guess what you might actually want or want not to, because we cannot guess that. So therefore, if you want to avoid jumping or any kind of weird scenario, please put that in there. And then, oh, look at that. So if you are specifying your orientation, you should definitely specify also sensor. Because the problem is when I'm playing a game or something, or I'm using Android, and I'm going from this mode into this mode, which is very natural, right? It's upside down. And the other thing is the camera is here. See, it's here. It's not there, like on a phone. So it doesn't even make much sense to actually say, hey, I need the camera on top, because it's not really on top of us anyways. And the worst thing which can be done, that is going into the manifest file, specifying your landscape, and then call later on set requested orientation with another orientation. That is really throwing off everything, so please don't ever do that. So launch sizes. You have various possibilities to actually get a certain window and a certain size. So there are first hints. This is something new, which we have done especially for our form factor, which means like desktop. You can especially give us some kind of hints what you want to see inside a desktop environment. So do you want to have a small window, a big window? Should it be landscape? Should it be portrait? By specifying these kind of hints, you should actually be put into the right size without worrying of which size exactly it is. Then the next thing is you can actually start your intent with a special options command, which is already there since N. And by specifying the set launch bounds, you can then move your window to a certain size and location. And the last possibility you have is for every intent, you can also specify a layout command, which allows you to give you a minimum size, a default size, and where it should actually be laid out on the screen. Should it be left, right, top, and so on. So what kind of window modes do we know? Well, we know, of course, windowed, as we are running on a desktop. And in this case, if you're running in this mode, you will actually run in, I think it's a 5x size screen on that screen, so which is then portrait. If you are maximized, you will actually see the caption or the application control bar on top. And the window will always cover the entire screen. So even if you are only portrait, the rest will be blanked out with black. And Then, if you're in this mode, your application can then request to be full screen. It can actually do the standard stuff, which is also always common on Android, to simply say, I want to take over the system UI, I want to be full screen, and then we are going out of your way, and the caption and as well as the shelf will be hidden. Yeah, the most important thing to get more space being used properly is add more layouts for bigger sizes. So you can actually, well, the thing is, the more sizes you have, the better it is, especially with bigger sizes. Avoid restarting if, well, there are some applications. If you are not using the layout system, you should try to avoid the resizing and do the on layout change commands yourself. Because that way, you can actually get a smooth experience. We come to that one later. However, you should always use on-save instance and on-restore instance, because that is helping you on Android world as well as on the Chromebook world. As better the restore function is, as better it is for the user. The only thing on a phone is you don't really notice it that much, but if you have a window and suddenly the content is gone and you see something else from the beginning, that is quite annoying. So, and oh yeah, if you are resizing the window, you should definitely make sure that if there are some elements on the screen which you cannot access, and they are simply gone, don't try to access them. We have seen some applications crashing because of that, and that was, of course, not fixable by us. So here's a good example for a large screen layout, and you probably know it, and you have seen it since years, but it's always a good thing to show again. So there is a portrait application. Well, portrait shows you only one line, and you have then the landscape version where you get simply another part of the screen, like that. So, which is something which you have seen with fragments already since a long time. So next thing is Netflix uses the whole screen efficiently to display the title's imagery, synopsis, and episode list to give you the user's contextual information before hitting play. So one thing, what I was mentioning earlier, is there is, unfortunately, a caption or a window control bar. This thing is, unfortunately, at least for now, part of the window, so it is inside your view hierarchy. If you are now putting something into the root of the view hierarchy, you might actually mess up something there. So for the time being, we should really encourage you to not do these kind of things. And according to the framework team, this is something what you shouldn't do anyways, so therefore try to avoid that if possible. The next thing is you should actually always make sure to not assume that the top left corner of your window is at 0, 0. It's most certainly not, because there is first the caption and then comes your content. So always try to get your coordinates relative to the content origin. And if you have the window size from your application, you will actually get the window size including the caption. So essentially that means that your content is a little bit smaller than the real full window. Window resizing has a lot of hurdles, unfortunately. So, as I mentioned earlier, to make it seamless, you should really have the save and restore functionality. And again, this thing is something which helps you also in the Android world. This is not really only something for Chromebooks. You should have that anyways, either way. So, and if you are using on configuration change and you are doing dynamic layouting, please add that there as well. If you don't want to be resized, you can actually put into your activity resizable false, which is for the most part true. There are some edge cases where you can get resized, but usually this is true. And your window size will not be the display size, for sure. So therefore, always use get activity, get resources, get configuration, screen width and height in DP in order to figure out what the real size of your window is. Oh, yeah. So then the next thing is to get the current configuration of the screen and the matrix and everything, you should use get resources, get configuration, which was more or less in the point before already. So the window bounds can change at any point in time, so be aware of that you are not really statically caching the size of the screen or the window somewhere. We have seen that also in some applications which are simply first time they run, they simply get then the size of the screen, they store it somewhere in their own data, and they never look at it again. They scale everything, and thereafter, when you resize the window, everything is looking funny. You do really try to avoid that as well. And then, yeah, if you're using the layout system, everything will be done automatically. Otherwise, you have to take care of it yourself. You can do that via OpenGL, which is then resizing pretty nicely. But yeah. So if you have a native application, you should actually get the start size, looking at the M last content, X, Y, width, and height. You should actually, you could also use your content, and you should definitely then listen to all the changes which are coming down the pipe via the listeners. So definitely look at any kind of changes which can happen to the layout and or your window size. So with that, let me show you a short demonstration by Margaret Chang about resizing.
Great. Thanks, everyone. My name is Margaret, and today I'll be showing you some pretty cool things that your Android apps can do on Chrome OS. Actually, I have here one of the latest Chromebooks, the Samsung Chromebook Pro, that will be releasing soon with the NuGet rebase of Play Store on Chrome. So let's get started. You can see that it's pretty small on the screen, right? So from here, it's very hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and resize the app, and again, I could typically do that by hitting this little maximize button or the full screen key. But I actually have a developer option enabled that lets me perform free-form resizing by dragging the borders of the window. So see that? The content scales really well and very beautifully, and the content also updates dynamically. So if you're able to do something like this into your app, you'll be giving your users much more control over their desktop real estate. And with that, I'm going to send you back over to Stefan to talk about just how you can enable these developer options so that you can also try these on your apps too.
Sweet. Thank you, Margaret. So to get to the developer options, all you have to do is you have to go first into the Chrome window. You go into the settings, and you type in Android. And then you will see the highlighted Android section, and you click on Android settings. A side tip, you should actually now go into your shelf, right-click on it, and pin it to the shelf so that you can access it later on quicker when you need to. And with that, so there are currently two developer options of interest for you. The first one is the dynamic resizing option. So you should definitely turn that on and try to test your application. See that it's actually first dynamically, fluidly resizing everything. So if it's not resizing fluidly, what you should do is you should actually look into your activate. So if it is not dynamically doing that, and you're using the layout system, and you are getting restarted, you should actually make sure that all the resources which you're using, they are cached. That you're not trying to reallocate them again, because that takes time, and that makes the whole process much laggier, and it doesn't look that good. So, and as you have seen just in our demonstration, it can be really, really smooth. So therefore, as smoother, as nicer it is. And then the next thing is, well, as I said earlier, we have this kind of root rule, and you don't really know exactly what your window is doing. And if you ever come to the point where you are not really sure what you see, you can always turn on the second option, which is to show the content, well, the state of the window manager, which is then presented in the window title bar. As you can see here, for example, there's N resizable LU, which means it's the state U means it can do both. It's currently in landscape, and it's an N resizable application, which is the best thing what can happen. So in the second option, no, actually, I was joking. There's a third option. So there is another one. So if you want to also test already maximize, you can actually turn on an option which is named something like default size and orientation, yada, yada, yada. And you put that thing into use phone-sized window and default to portrait orientation and allow portrait-only application to maximize. So if you select that thing, you can also maximize your portrait applications, which gives you then the control bar, everything as I said. So we have not turned that on yet by default, but it'll come sooner or later. So therefore, you can already go ahead and try that as well. So then, if you are using a camera, you have most certainly already seen something in our previous experiments with M. That was, you were starting an application and suddenly everything was like somehow rotated, which was not really that great. So the question is, how can you fix these kind of things? Well, the first thing what we want to tell you is, if you're moving to at least n, and you make your window resizable, we take care of you. So with that, we should be able to make everything work for you, but without that, unfortunately, you might actually hit some edge cases which don't work. So therefore, simply doing that will fix everything. So from window manager to input-related topics. Well, the thing is, as I said earlier, phones are a little bit different. And I guess you have possibly never used the keyboard with a mouse with your phone, right? Yeah, me neither. So the first thing which you should do is, there are input focus elements on your screen. So and the thing is, at the moment, Android is trying to guess what you might actually want to have there, how you are actually navigating through that. On a desktop, you expect a little bit more than that. So by using, for example, tab key, you want to actually tap through them. You want to use directional keys. And this is something which is in Android since ever. However, the thing is, like, it was not really used that much because the keyboard was not used. So if you want to use that, you can simply add that to your manifest file, as pointed out here, as pointed out, I think, API level, I don't know, 12, something really pretty old. So therefore, simply go online and check it out. It's totally easy to do, and it helps a lot of people, especially for accessibility and so on. So the next thing is, if you want to handle keyboard actions, you can use key event callback handler. So this thing will allow you to actually get all the keyboard events directly and to do something with it, like, for example, in a game. You can also use then the modifiers to check out if, for example, the shift key was pressed or something, and you can do then special actions on that. You don't have to really re-implement, of course, the text edit field. That is already there. But if you ever want to edit text, you should actually use on key down, on key long press, and on key up to do your text detection. Please don't use on key pre-IME unless you really want to implement the full IME stuff. You don't want to do that. Please leave this to us and use only the key standard handling. And off to Margaret for a text input demo.
Thanks, Stefan. OK, Adobe is a developer that has taken the next step into implementing their keyboard shortcuts into their Android app, which typically breaks the barrier between your traditional mobile and desktop users. All right, here I'm going to go ahead and show you some shortcuts that Adobe has implemented into their Lightroom app. Here's a collection of some photos that I already have in my library. And the first thing I'm going to do is try to go through each photo and rate them from 0 to 5 stars by pressing on the corresponding keys, numbers on the keypad. So let's get started. I remember this is an amazing meal, so 3. Beautiful place, beautiful picture, so 5. Delicious meal, but homemade, so 4. And so on and so forth. You can see here that I was also able to traverse through the photos using the navigational arrow keys. All right, so now let's say I want to make a collection of food photos. I can easily do that by pressing X to reject, P to pick, and if I want to reverse this at any time, I can click U. You can see how easy I was able to go through and organize my photos. If you are able to also implement some of these keyboard shortcuts into your apps, you'll also be able to increase user productivity workflow as well. So with that, I'll hand it back to Stefan to talk more about how to utilize some other hardware features like mouse and stylus.
Thank you, Margaret. So several Chrome OS support now Stylus, as you have possibly seen already with our latest editions. Well, there is it. I can't find it. Oh, it's not there. Great. OK, so if you don't care about any kind of input-related things, like what kind of device it is, well, you're done. You don't have to do anything, because if you're using already the motion event, that is all fine. If you are, on the other hand, interested in, for example, pen input, well, then you should actually call the motion event get tool type, which gives you exactly the kind of device you're using. You can get then the pressure and the tilt. So, however, the thing is, of course, you're getting one of these events only per frame, which means like you're missing out on all the precision what we can give you. So in order to get everything, you want to have the precision movements. And for that, you should actually have an additional look into get historical X, Y, and pressure and axis value, which gives you then the full path. So then The other thing what we have is a very sophisticated palm rejection, which means like even though when you're using your palm on the screen, it will actually not register as some kind of drawing. But the problem is first you're already getting some kind of event. So in order to make everything work, you're getting first the, hey, pen goes down or finger goes down, and then you're moving maybe a little bit, and then you get a cancel call, which is essentially canceling the entire pass, which is a signal for you to remove the entire thing. Margaret will show us now a nice demo for the...
Thank you. OK, let's go over an app that has really utilized Stylus input well and also implemented some specific Stylus features. So first, I'm going to go ahead and put my Chromebook into tablet mode because it's much easier to write on. All right. OK. Then I'm going to go ahead and take out my trusty Stylus device. And let's get started. OK. Squid is an app that easily lets me draw and sketch. And you can see here that as I put my palm across the screen, there are no marks from it. At the same time, I can write with my palm on the screen. And there are no marks from my palm. This is because the system is detecting the palm and aborting the event path. And then the app picks that up and undoes the line that has been drawn so far from my palm. So one thing Squid has also done is they've implemented a pressure sensitivity feature, which you can see here. So what that does is it allows me to make lighter or darker lines based off of how hard I press on the screen. This means that lighter lines are from lighter pressure, and darker lines are from heavier pressure. So with that, I'm going to send you back over to Stefan to wrap up inputs.
Thank you, Margaret. Next thing is input compatibility mode. So the thing with the compatibility is, well, very simple. No one was actually using a mouse yet, right? So and therefore, the scroll wheel has a special input. It is defined by Android since ever, but no one is using it. On a Chromebook, this is, of course, pretty bad. Because if you're using, then, for example, your mouse, nothing will move when you're trying to scroll. In order to solve this, we have a compatibility mode. So, and what we do is we look at that thing, we have the event, and we are converting it automatically in a touch scroll event. And that is usually done under the hood for you. If you don't care about these kind of things, everything will simply work. However, if you do care about these kind of things and other special input quirks, you can actually specify in the user section of your manifest file Android hardware type PC. If you do that, and please use this false, because otherwise you run only on Chromebooks, then you will get the full breadth of all the different input events possible. And yeah, since we are running a little bit short, I'll try to speed this up a little bit. So that means like you're actually getting then the proper scroll events, and you can also then check out you can distinguish the two-finger touchpad scrolling from the touch screen scrolling by looking at get source, and you can distinguish also the drag operation, the drag and drop operation from the touchpad scroll action. So this brings me now to the last paragraph, how to test your application to ensure positive user experience. So first off, you should definitely make sure that all your manifest files are in order. So, which means like check out that you are specifying the orientation you want to use, the size you want to use, add the meta flags if you want to use them, and check out that the min width, max width, and all these kind of things, they are actually specified properly. If you are interested in the special events, use Android hardware type PC, which will definitely give you all the events. Then you should definitely test the resizing of your window. So make it really long. Try to resize your window as crazy as possible. Use our developer option and make sure that everything is smooth and it's not crashing. And then also change the device from tablet into notebook form factor to see that everything is working fine. And also make sure that the caption, so the window control bar, is not offsetting your input events by some kind of fraction of the screen. So, and make sure that the save and restore is working properly, that you are restoring that properly, and that everything works there as well. Yeah. Very soon, we will have an emulator for you. You should actually take out your phone. You should actually make a screenshot of this thing, because nobody can remember the very exciting shortcut, goo.gl/q8ptkz. If you want to sign up for our virtual machine, you can actually do it there, and we will actually send you then a preview as soon as it's ready, which should be fairly soon. So with that, you should actually be able to develop everything locally without the need of using a Chromebook. If you have any more specific questions, then please go to our developer site on developer-android.com, topic arc, and we will update this page. It should be updated by now, but we will add more stuff to it over time. So with that, let's summarize and wrap up the session. I'm doing that now very fast. So the takeaway is your application is already working, everything is fine, you shouldn't really worry. Well, maybe you should worry. You should definitely try it out. You should definitely move to API level 24, unless you want to be stuck into a small window. Plan for huge screens, very, very important. Allow your application to be resizable. Make sure to specify window requirements in your manifest file, as mentioned earlier. Be consistent with the window orientation, and add all the nice desktop features which are making a desktop a desktop.